One of the most powerful rebuttals to the criticism that directive principles are merely pious wishes is this. Over 75 years, India has passed legislation that explicitly implements these directives. The directive principles have been operationalized through laws, policies, schemes, and constitutional amendments. Knowing which law implements which directive principle is directly tested in UPSC prelims. Let me take you through the most important pairings. Article 39A was added by the 42nd Amendment of 1976. It says the state shall ensure that the operation of the legal system promotes justice on the basis of equal opportunity and provides free legal aid so that opportunities for securing justice are not denied to any citizen by reason of economic or other disabilities. This directive principle was implemented by the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987, which established the National Legal Services Authority, or NALSA. But even before this act, the Supreme Court in the Hussain-era Khatun case of 1979 read the right to free legal aid directly into Article 21. The court held that the right to a fair trial under Article 21 includes the right to free legal aid for those who cannot afford a lawyer. The directive principle under Article 39A became a fundamental right through this interpretation. Article 40 on panchayats is the most completely implemented directive principle. The 73rd Constitutional Amendment of 1992 added Part 9 to the Constitution. Articles 243 to 243.0 now provide a comprehensive constitutional framework for Panchayati Raj. What was a directive principle became a constitutional mandate. This is the only directive principle that was elevated to constitutional requirement status. Article 41 directs the state to make provisions for the right to work, education, and public assistance. MGNREGA, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act of 2005, directly implements Article 41 along with Article 39A. It guarantees 100 days of employment to rural households. The Right to Education Act of 2009 implements the education dimension of Article 41. PM Kisan and PMJDY implement the public assistance dimension. Article 42 directs just and humane conditions of work and maternity relief. The Maternity Benefit Act of 1961 implements this. The Maternity Benefit Amendment Act of 2017 significantly strengthened it, extending paid maternity leave to 26 weeks for the first 2 children. This is a model case of directive principle implementation. Article 43 on living wages is implemented by the Minimum Wages Act of 1948. But here is the honest constitutional assessment that makes Maine's answers score high. Article 43 asks for a living wage, not just a minimum wage. A living wage is enough for a dignified life. A minimum wage is the bare floor. India has implemented minimum wages. A true living wage, as the International Labor Organization defines it, has not been achieved. The gap between the directive principle's aspiration and its actual implementation continues. Article 48A on environment is implemented by the Environment Protection Act of 1986, the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, and the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010. The National Green Tribunal regularly invokes Article 48A in its environmental orders. Article 49 on protection of monuments is implemented by the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and remains Act of 1958, which governs the Archaeological Survey of India. Article 50 on separation of judiciary from executive is substantially implemented through the Code of Criminal Procedure, which separated judicial magistrates from executive magistrates. In most states today, the district magistrate handles executive functions, and a separate judicial magistrate handles criminal trial functions. Now an honest assessment of what has not been implemented. Article 44 on the Uniform Civil Code remains the most significant unimplemented directive principle at the national level. Article 43 on living wages exists only as minimum wages, falling short of the true standard. Article 39D on equal pay for equal work has legislation in the Equal Remuneration Act of 1976, but the gender pay gap persists in practice. The pattern is important for Maine's. Most directive principles have been partially implemented. Very few have been fully implemented. Article 40 on panchayats is the clearest success. Article 44 on UCC is the clearest failure at national level. Now your MCQ. Which of the following pairs of directive principle and implementing legislation is correctly matched? Option 1. Article 42 on Just Conditions of Work with the Minimum Wages Act of 1948. Option 2. Article 39A on Free Legal Aid with the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. Option 3. Article 40 on Village Panchayats with the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. Option 4. Article 41 on Right to Work with the Maternity Benefit Act of 1961. Think carefully. The correct answer is option 2. Article 39A on Equal Justice and Free Legal Aid was implemented by the Legal Services Authorities Act of 1987. Option 1 is wrong because Article 42 on Just Conditions of Work and Maternity Relief is implemented by the Maternity Benefit Act, not the Minimum Wages Act. The Minimum Wages Act implements Article 43. Option 3 is wrong because Article 40 is implemented by the 73rd Constitutional Amendment of 1992. Option 4 is wrong because Article 41 on Right to Work is implemented by MNREGA.